Hi, everybody. Welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. I just came across something really interesting. It has to do with two seemingly unrelated topics. The first one is the concept of the Joseph Smith Jubilee years. I've done videos about this before, and I'll explain what it is in just a little bit in case you missed those videos. And then the second thing is a talk given by President Hinckley as president of the church, where he read some of the verses from Matthew 24 that have to do with the signs of the times of the second coming. And after he reads those verses, he gives specific examples of recent disasters that are fulfillment of those prophecies about signs of the times. But not just recent disasters, things going all the way back to Pompeii and the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. He included that as part of the last days. And it is. So it started with this email. I got this email from Kevin H. Subject line, Jubilee years / natural disasters. And then in the email, hi Jared, I was just watching your entering a special season video where you talk about Jubilees. I was looking at your spreadsheet of Jubilee years starting in 1969, took out my phone and added 7 years. I kept adding 7 years, and 2 years stood out, 2004 and 2011. Both of these years, 7 years apart, are years that two of the most powerful earthquakes ever recorded took place in Indonesia and Japan, respectively. The year 2011, year of the quote-unquote super outbreak, was also when the U.S. experienced the highest number of tornadoes ever recorded in a single year. See below. A record that still stands for now. Could be something, could be nothing, but it is just something I noticed. Keep up the good work. Thank you for sticking to the words of church leaders and clarifying when you're stating your opinion. Thanks again, Kevin. And then he included this graphic right here. And thank you for the email. And that's how we should always do it. We should stick to the words of the prophets and apostles, general authorities, general officers of the church. I think it's good to wonder and ponder, but we have to be careful not to start teaching that as fact. And we need to, if we have an idea about something, we need to state that it's our opinion, unless it's based on something factual. So we are going to look at some facts, and then I'm going to share my opinion about something in this video. So 2004 and 2011. I just wanted to confirm. I did just a quick Google search, and indeed, the 2011 earthquake that caused that big tsunami, which was pretty incredible, definitely the stuff of the last days and cinematic. That earthquake was, in fact, the biggest earthquake recorded in Japan. I didn't know that. I guess it was a 9.1. So that is massive. And then the same thing with the 2004. It's called the 2004 Indian Ocean earthquake, which also caused a tsunami. That one killed over 200,000 people, which is a lot as far as natural disasters go. That's like astronomical. As far as the tornado outbreak, you may have had the years mixed up. Unless this is wrong, I just did a quick search. I'm going to verify this more later. But the AI overview says that it was actually 2004 that you had the 1,817 confirmed tornadoes. And question is, are we going to see another record-breaking year? I wouldn't be surprised if we did. But okay, so we've already, before we get into the Joseph Smith Jubilees and President Hinckley's talk, I just want to point out also that 2004 seemed to be a type of pivotal year, maybe a hinge point. That's when we got President Oak's Second Coming talk. At that time, he was in the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. But to date, this has been his biggest Second Coming talk called Preparation for the Second Coming, where he goes through a numbered list of the signs of the times right here. And I've never seen any other conference talk do this, like list out the different signs of the times like this in different categories. And there's other interesting things that are said. Well, here we are in 2026. He is now president of the church, which I feel makes this all the more important and significant that he gave this talk back then. And what we've noticed is that, uh, for me, it started with the Indonesia earthquake and tsunami that took place that same year, the day after Christmas. So he gave this talk. He talked about the signs of the times, and later that year, you have that record-breaking earthquake and tsunami that mostly affected Indonesia. But what I didn't know until today is that we also have this record-breaking tornado season in the US in that same year. So the earthquake and tsunami, the great outbreak of 2004. And then we've also talked about these record-breaking wildfires. This is my spreadsheet where I'm trying to track the largest and deadliest and most destructive, those three categories: largest, deadliest, or most destructive wildfires in these different provinces, states, territories, countries, and regions. And I've searched as much as I possibly can. And like, there's only a couple before 2004, but from 2004 onward, you've had all these locations have had record-breaking wildfires: Utah, Texas, Alaska, Arizona, uh, the entirety of the European Union, as well as Canada and Russia, California. So another way that we can visualize this is with this chart that I made based off of that spreadsheet we were just looking at. So here's 2004, and look at everything that came afterwards. So this is what it looks like so far. Not that it's 100% complete, but I have captured, I think, the main, countries and states and provinces that experience wildfires. I feel like this is a pretty good picture of what has happened. So from 2004 onward. And then also, this is just another way to look at earthquakes. This is my spreadsheet for earthquakes, but here you have the 2004 Indonesian earthquake. This chart right here is the death toll by year. And just look at that compared to all these other years, this huge spike. And then in 2010, there was another earthquake. This time it was in Haiti, and that seems to have killed over 200,000. But that death toll, I think, is less certain, even to this day. Okay, so President Oaks spoke in 2004, and starting with that year, it seems we've had a lot of record-breaking things take place. Now, President Hinckley, and then we'll go to the Joseph Smith Jubilee years. President Hinckley spoke in the October 2005 General Conference. So this was almost a year from the time that the Indonesian earthquake and tsunami took place. So I think he had that on his mind. He brings it up here in just a minute. He says, if anyone has any doubt concerning the terrible things that can and will affect mankind, let him read the 24th chapter of Matthew. And then he reads those verses. I don't want this video to go too long. Then I'm going to skip down. And then he says, again, let me just point out, there's so many times that we think that all the scriptures only have to do with us, like right now in 2026, that we're the main characters. This is meant to be our movie that we're watching, that everything's supposed to be cinematic, and, everything that's happened before this point is nothing. Well, apparently that's not the case with as far as President Hinckley is concerned. So he said the plague or Black Death of the 14th century took millions of lives. Other pandemic diseases, such as smallpox, have brought untold suffering and death through the centuries. In the year AD 79, so this was not very long after Christ um, was crucified and then resurrected. Uh, this is not, I mean, this is only 9 years after Jerusalem was destroyed and the temple was destroyed. In the year AD 79, the great city of Pompeii was destroyed when Mount Vesuvius erupted. Chicago was ravaged by a terrible fire. Tidal waves have swamped areas of Hawaii. The San Francisco earthquake in 1906 ruined the city and took some 3,000 lives. The hurricane that hit Galveston, Texas in 1900 killed 8,000. And more recently, as you know, has been the terrible tsunami of Southeast Asia, where thousands of lives were lost and where relief efforts are still needed. How pretentious are the words of the revelation found in the 88th section of the Doctrine and Covenants? That's one of the big Second Coming sections of the Doctrine and Covenants. It's basically section 45 and 88 are probably the two biggest. Concerning the calamities that should befall after the testimonies of the elders. The Lord says, "For after your testimony cometh the testimony of earthquakes, that shall cause groanings in the midst of her, and men shall fall upon the ground, and shall not be able to stand. And also cometh the testimony of the voice of thunderings, and the voice of lightnings, and the voice of tempests, and the voice of the waves of the sea heaving themselves beyond their bounds." Which definitely sounds like tsunamis, although you can also have things like storm surges and, stuff like that. "And all things shall be in commotion, and surely men's hearts shall fail them, for fear shall come upon all people." How interesting are descriptions of the tsunami and the recent hurricanes in terms of the language of this revelation, which says, "The voice of the waves of the sea heaving themselves beyond their bounds." Okay, so we've talked about these specific disasters and pandemics, mostly looking at it through the lens of, like, look, the last days includes, as far back as the year 79 AD. It's not just us, although we are in the last dispensation where uh, a lot of the things happen, most of the things, but they are included too. But I've always kind of wondered, you know, if we look at these things that have happened, so if we ignore these things from before the last dispensation, before the restoration, and we just look at like this, the Chicago fire, the San Francisco earthquake, the hurricane that hit Galveston, Texas. I've always wondered, like, why did he pick those exactly? I guess just because they're notable, but I'm sure that there's plenty of other disasters that surpass these. Um, he does pick different types of disasters: fire, earthquake, hurricane, tsunami. So maybe, I don't know, maybe he's just like thinking back on his life and the experiences that he has had and the things that he's read about. And so maybe these were just kind of like what came to his mind. But now I'm not so sure, because when we look at the Joseph Smith Jubilees, we find something interesting. Um, let's go up here. And by the way, this is my spreadsheet called Timeline Jubilees. Let's go to 1836. So the church was established in 1830. The year 1830 was the first year of the church. 1831 was the second year. And so going on down the line, 1836 was the seventh year of the church. And I have a quote here. This is, I think you can find it in History of the Church, but it's also on the Joseph Smith Papers website. So this is Joseph Smith. Journal 1835 to 1836, pages 189 to 190. Savior made his appearance to some, while angels ministered unto others, and it was a Pentecost and endowment indeed, long to be remembered, for the sound shall go forth from this place into all the world, and the occurrences of this day shall be handed down upon the pages of sacred history to all generations, as the day of Pentecost. So shall this day be numbered and celebrated as a year of Jubilee and time of rejoicing to the saints of the Most High God. So this day numbered and celebrated as a year of Jubilee. Now you might just think like, oh, he's just like using terms from the Bible. He's just trying to express like what an exciting and spiritual event that was, the dedication of the Kirtland Temple. Um, Maybe that's just like a one-off thing. But no, 7 years later, in 1843, this was the year before he was martyred, we have two more accounts of this concept of the Jubilee year. So first, this is also Joseph Smith Papers, Journal, December 1842 to June 1844. This is Joseph Smith. Okay, Thursday, April 6th. That's an important detail. April 6th, 1843, the first day of the Jubilee. April 6th. Now, I don't know how it works, but now you can see that this was not just a one-off thing with the dedication of the Kirtland Temple. The dedication of the Kirtland Temple was in March. It was not on April 6th. So I don't know if I suppose the Jubilee year would have started with the dedication of the Kirtland Temple and it would have gone for a year. But in 1843, it started on April 6th. That's the Savior's birthday. So the first day of the Jubilee of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, a special conference assembled on the platform of the temple. This is exactly copied over from the Joseph Smith Papers website, and they exactly copy it from the original document. So sometimes there's misspellings and it's kind of not written correctly. So assembled on the platform of the temple, floor of the basement at 10 o'clock a.m. Footnote 119. The anniversary of the organization of the church on April 6, 1830, Wilford Woodruff noted that the term Jubilee was used because the anniversary marked the commencement of the 14th year of the church, in apparent reference to an adaptation of the 7-year sabbatical cycle outlined in the Old Testament. So I have what it says in Wilford Woodruff's journal, and this is on the Wilford Woodruff Papers website. April 6th, Jubilee, 1843. The Conference of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints met at the Temple of the Lord at Nauvoo at 10 o'clock a.m. It held Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, 3 days. It is the commencement of the 14th year of the church, which makes it the commencement of the Jubilee. We had an interesting time through the conference. So you would think that this is something that's been restored. The sabbatical years, which happen every 7 years, like that's how it was in the Old Testament. Although in this case, instead of being called, Shemitahs or sabbatical years, they're being called Jubilees for some reason. In the Old Testament, it was, again, you'd have seven sets of 7 years, so 49 years, and then the 50th year would be the Jubilee. But this is the last dispensation. We no longer live or practice the law of Moses, and there's certain things that are done differently now. Like we think about solemn assemblies, for example. So, but these are the only two mentions or the only two times that I know of that these type of Jubilee years have been called. There have been like official Jubilees of the church. There was one in 1880 where they did like an actual Jubilee that involved forgiving debt and stuff like that. But anyway, I don't know if this was meant to continue. Like if Joseph Smith had not been martyred at that time, if like 7 years later there would have been another of these 7-year jubilees. I don't know if maybe church leadership is still thinking about it, or maybe it still has significance, although we're not really practicing this as a church right now. I don't know. I don't know. So this is where we get into my opinion. All I know for sure is there was the first Jubilee in 1836 and the second Jubilee in 1843. And then we start getting into these like 50-year Jubilees. That first one being in 1880. Okay, but if they had continued, so we're looking at column N, the third one would have been in 1850, the next one would have been 1857, and so on. And look what happens when we get to 1871. President Hinckley, in this talk that we just read from, he mentioned the Great Chicago Fire. It happened during one of these Jubilee years, 1871. That's when it happened. Okay, so the Great Chicago Fire, let's continue. There's the, spoiler alert with San Francisco. There's the Great Galveston Hurricane. Now, this did not happen during a Jubilee year, but it was the next year, so it was kind of close. But the San Francisco earthquake, that happened during the 11th Joseph Smith Jubilee year in 1906. And then we have the 2004 Indian Ocean earthquake and tsunami. Right? So those are three of the disasters that President Hinckley mentioned in his talk, where he's giving specific examples of disasters that would be considered signs of the times. So we got three of them, but there's actually a fourth one. And the fourth one requires us to go all the way back to the year 79 AD, if I can find it, when Pompeii was destroyed by Mount Vesuvius, the eruption of that volcano. Isn't that interesting? Out of the few examples that he gave, 4 of them happened during these Jubilee years. So Pompeii, let's just do it again. Pompeii, and then we got to go all the way down. Okay, Pompeii, the Great Chicago Fire, the San Francisco earthquake, and then the Indonesia earthquake and tsunami. So those are 4 that happened in those Jubilee years. And then you could consider a 5th one, potentially, the Texas hurricane, the Great Galveston Hurricane, even though it's not precisely in that year. So like 4 for sure, and possibly 5. You could potentially count the hurricane. So again, he talks about the Black Plague and then other pandemic diseases like smallpox. Then he talks about Pompeii, Chicago Fire, tidal waves that swamped areas of Hawaii. I looked that up and it didn't land in any of those years. But then San Francisco, and then the Galveston, Texas hurricane, and then the tsunami. So like half of those things are events that took place in a Joseph Smith Jubilee year. I don't know if President Hinckley meant to do that or not. I don't know if he's aware of the Jubilee cycles, and maybe, again, maybe the brethren keep track of it, um, or maybe not. But I think that's beyond coincidence. It's so unlikely. He could have picked any number of other disasters. There's been plenty of them throughout the centuries, but he chose those ones. So I think that's so interesting. Um, as far as the Galveston hurricane not being in a Jubilee year, I want to point something out. So you'll remember that we had these two great American solar eclipses. The first one was in 2017. It was on President Monson's birthday, of all days, and just a few months before President Nelson became president of the church. President Nelson became president of the church the next year, and that next year was one of the Joseph Smith Jubilee years. It was the 27th, which is perfect because there were so many sevens with President Nelson. Now, the thing about this is if the Jubilees start on April 6th, well, then technically President Nelson did not become president of the church during the Jubilee year because he became president of the church on January 14th. Although his first year as president of the church lined up with the Joseph Smith Jubilee year. And then in 2024, we had the second great American eclipse. And then the next year, 2025, that's when President Oaks became president of the church. And it was within the actual Joseph Smith Jubilee year. A lot of people noted, you know, like as soon as people started thinking about these eclipses, that you would have these two great American eclipses and that they would be 7 years apart. A lot of like Christians outside of our faith that are into eschatology and looking for signs of the times, they saw significance in that they were spaced about 7 years apart. But for us as members of the church, they should take on, I think, more significance. I mean, first of all, I've pointed out how that first eclipse, the path of totality went over all the Missouri church sites perfectly, except for one that's in like South Kansas City, but it's like a smaller site. But it perfectly goes over Adamonte-Ammon, Independence, and everything in between. The second one in 2024, the path of totality went over the Sacred Grove, as well as Fayette, New York, where the church was officially established, and over the Kirtland Temple, the first temple in this dispensation. And that eclipse took place the day after General Conference and about a month after the church purchased the Kirtland Temple from Community of Christ. So these things lining up with these two presidents of the church and the Joseph Smith Jubilee years and going over those sacred sites, I'm sorry, I don't think that's coincidence. I think it's a sign of the times meant for us, specifically for us, although there were other Christians that were able to appreciate it. The email mentioned, oh, sorry, I got to sneeze. Oh, gosh. I think that's like a first. I'm not sure if I've sneezed on the channel before. I think I've had like almost a 5-year streak. Okay, so yeah, the 2011 Japanese earthquake and tsunami, Japan's largest recorded earthquake, that took place during the 26th Joseph Smith Jubilee. And the year before that was the 2010 Haitian earthquake that killed over 200,000 people. So you have these like really big events. Now that's the thing. Now this is where it kind of gets into opinion, because you'd have to like list all the different natural disasters. If you narrowed it down to really big ones, certainly these would be part of that group of like the really big natural disasters and events and signs in the heavens with like these two eclipses. So you could make the case, well, you could look at any year or you could take any interval and you'll come up with things. I guess so. I guess. But what you can't do is take the prophet and have him write a talk and him just happen to mention these four events that took place in these Joseph Smith Jubilees. That just seems very unlikely. I guess it could happen. Uh, I'm not even saying that President Hinckley was necessarily conscious of it, because maybe he wasn't. Maybe it's just pure inspiration. But here we are in 2026 talking about it, and that's the fact. That four of those events took place in Joseph Smith Jubilee years, and one of them, the Galveston, Texas hurricane, was like the year after or something like that. So I don't know. Other things that I've noted, this is new right here. We got Pearl Harbor, the Pearl Harbor attack in 1941. That was the 16th Joseph Smith Jubilee. The state of Israel was founded in the 17th Joseph Smith Jubilee. That's kind of a big one when it comes to prophecy and signs of the times. 1976 was the 21st Joseph Smith Jubilee. 21 is 3 times 7. And that year was the bicentennial of the United States, which is interesting since we're celebrating America 250 this year. We're talking about that, you get the idea. And I think that's all that I have on here. Let me just double check. Yeah, that's pretty. Oh yeah, there was one other thing. If we go back to the year 30, yeah, here we go. If we go back to the year 30, if we were to take these 7-year intervals back to the time of Christ, one of them would be in the year 30. The year, according to Elder Cosse, who recently spoke at a BYU Idaho devotional, and he pointed out how 2030 is going to be the 2,000-year anniversary of Christ beginning his mortal ministry. Well, if you take this pattern, this 7-year interval backwards in time, the year 30 is one of those years. The year that he started his mortal ministry, most likely. So I don't know. What are the chances? The thing that initially blew my mind was Pompeii. That being one of those years, part of this 7-year cycle. So can we say that this is an official thing? No, not right now. It was during the life of Joseph Smith. They at least did it 2 times, but maybe it completely ended at that point. Or maybe it was some kind of revelation that he received where it's not just commemorating the 7-year anniversary of the church, the 14th year of the church, but maybe it's part of a larger pattern. Maybe it's part of God's timing. All I know is that these things that President Hinckley mentioned, 4 of them happened during these 7-year cycles. And then you have President Nelson and President Oaks, which we've talked so much about them. I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but we all know that President Nelson was all about the second coming. And we know that both of them became apostles together. And, there's all the different things, the heart surgeon and the judge and, all the stuff. So this was an unexpected surprise. I've taken note of it. That's why I have these spreadsheets, so I don't forget these things. It's just too much to remember. You got to take note of it. We may refer back to it again in the future. But that's going to be it for this one. I'll talk to you guys later.